All right. Good morning, everybody. Well, I guess depending on where you are in the world, maybe it's morning where you are. Um, Later this year, November 1st through 3rd, to be exact, in Austin, Texas, we'll host the EntreArchitect Community Annual Meeting. It's a business conference for entrepreneur architects. In fact, it's the first ever live conference dedicated just to small firm entrepreneur architects. And even though November sounds like a long time from now, it feels like a long time from now, probably, depending on where you are in the country. It's really hot and sticky here in the Midwest right now. Um, that conference is going to be here before we know it. So I've started a new live stream series to introduce you to all of the fantastic speakers that we will have at the conference and to give you a little teaser about what their talks and workshops are going to be on. So, good morning. My name is Jeff Eccles. I'm the Director of Brand Strategy for EntreArchitect. It's the largest worldwide community of small firm architects. I'm also the host of Context and Clarity Live. And to kick this series off today, I'm joined by two people who are doing great work, and they are no strangers to the EntreArchitect community. So if you are familiar with EntreArchitect, you're probably familiar with these two. But rather than me ramble on with some sort of canned introduction, let me just ask one question. And that question is, who are you and what do you do?
Hi, I am Emily Mottram. I am an architect here in Maine. I am, or I like the term, building science educator. So I teach
I like that.
classes. Mike and I just co-authored a book together with two other great authors up here. We also host a monthly building science Zoom show that was started during the pandemic just to make sure that everybody was okay and has really blossomed into a cool way to share information. And so I would say, and I think I said this to when I very first met Mike, is those who educate the market own the market, and that's what we're trying to do is just bring building science to, a more tangible level that people can understand, why we would do this. So that's who I am and what I do.
I love that.
Uh, Hi, Jeff. I'm Mike Maines. I design homes and renovations here in Maine. I started out with a degree in engineering, building furniture, and then moved into construction. And then I helped a friend start a panelized passive house business along the way. And but I've been primarily a designer for 15 years now. And yeah, I actually first saw Emily at a conference maybe 10 years ago, and it was actually she was on a panel talking about the Pretty Good House, which was a a a relatively new concept at the time, but she came out with that line: "Those who educate the market own the market." And just it's you have those like experiences in your life where things just sort of like lock in, like, yep, that is an absolute truth, and that 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 one made me want to get to know Emily better, and then also just sort of helped clarify my career direction, and yeah, that led to eventually BS and Beer, which is our monthly show, but it's also a collection now of 15 to 20 local groups around mostly the U.S. and with one or two in Australia now, and growing as a way to build local communities and share building science knowledge, because building science is a pretty new field and a lot of uh, people, builders and architects don't understand it. But yeah, so that's what I do. Emily and I live about an hour away from each other, and yeah.
Yeah, that's well, and I love that. Those who um, that have that knowledge, those that educate, and that's one of the things that really stands out to me. Like I said in the introduction, the two of you are no strangers to folks in our community, our collective community of the EntreArchitect community, um, and I appreciate what you share about building science. One of the things that comes up, and we'll talk about your book here maybe in a couple of minutes, but one of the questions that I've seen or heard come up is, what's with the pretty good house? Why a pretty good house? Don't I want a great house or a good house, or what about this pretty good house? So can you clarify maybe that term for us?
Or do you want to try, Emily?
Well, so it's funny. We did a book launch last night on BS and beer, and Dan is probably way more elegant about this. So if Mike and I screw this up here, pop over to the YouTube channel and watch that one. But it, it came about when there were a lot of certification programs that were coming out, and people were a little bit frustrated by, some certification programs requiring you to do certain things, but not looking at other things that you might do. And that, not everything in every certification program economically made sense for where you were in the country or where you were with your budget. And it's not, I built a pretty good house. It's but a pretty good house, right? And that's where the difference is, bringing that kind of equity into these situations is that, the answer to your particular, problem solving solution, whatever, may not be to build the best house in the world, right? So, it takes into account that there are so many different ways that you could do it and things that you should think about if you're going to. And that's my takeaway. Anything you want to add to that, Mike?
Or yeah, or I think that covers it pretty well. But I guess I'd add that if if you think about the distribution on a curve of quality homes, and just consider performance as one measure of quality, quality of construction and other things, that there are the bleeding edge programs. Emily and I are both passive house people, and I'm interested in all of these really leadership programs that are really pulling the market, or pulling things forward from the bleeding edge. But it leaves those in the middle of the market, which is the vast majority of homes, are code minimum, more or less. So we're just and we usually find if you make energy improvements that go a little above code minimum, it doesn't have to be passive house level. Sometimes passive house does make financial sense, but often it doesn't. And so where do things, basically keep making improvements until they stop making financial sense. And we are focused not just on energy the way passive house is. It's really a more holistic approach, just everything you should be thinking about, because there's code minimum is the worst house you can legally build, which is getting better and better, but it's still, that's the worst you can legally build. And then there's all these other programs, and we're just saying, do a little better. And if you want, you can also call it, if it helps, you can think of it as the pretty darn good house. That helps some people.
Yeah, it's pretty darn good, or it comes down to, as you did, Emily. It comes down to the emphasis. Well, that's a pretty good house, or that's a pretty good house.
Right.
I like
Oh
that
yeah.
distinction there.
Although we do get a lot of people who misremember the title as the good enough house, and for some reason the good enough house offends us, whereas we like the pretty good house. I don't know.
Well, yeah, that's a different term.
Yeah, it's not good enough. It's pretty good.
There's somehow a comedy skit to come out of this as well, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it is meant to be, I think, not to make light of how complicated building is, but it should be kind of fun and comical. And if you read the book, there are funny parts and funny sections, and it's meant to, add light to, it's complicated to build.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, and this next question, I mean, we could take in different ways, because you're both designing, you're both involved in the construction of homes. You're both involved with the BS and Beer Show. You're both co-authors of the book. So when we think about who you're trying to help, this could be your clients, it could be the audiences, etc. Who ideally are you trying to help? Are you trying to help architects? Are you trying to help homeowners? And I, obviously I know this, yes is the answer, but ideally, who is it that you're trying to help with in any of these aspects of what you're doing?
Yeah, or yeah, it is everybody. We had to make a conscious decision early on, just to have sort of our target reader, and we decided, based partly on Sarah Susanka's Not So Big House series, which had the same publisher and editor as we have. That we found just personally that was effective because clients would come in asking for a not so big house, or did we know the not so big house philosophy, and just that's all about doing a little bit better in terms of size and using quality of design. So that was sort of our model, and we decided to write it for clients and potential clients, and sort of answering a lot of the questions we end up teaching clients, on a one-on-one basis. But it's hard to teach a client, 250 pages of information. So it's also what we wish our clients would come to us already knowing, like they've already reached a baseline. But because our goal really is to hopefully change the market a little bit, it's also, there's enough information in there that architects and designers and builders, some will already know most of this stuff, but most people, I think most professionals will learn something or think about things in a different way. And when clients start asking them if they know how to build a pretty good house, then they'll have enough information there to get to another level. There are much more involved books. This is sort of a very broad once over of building science and design and process, but it's we tried to write it for clients primarily. Would you agree, Emily?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I had not made the connection with the not so big house, but that's an interesting connection.
Yeah,
Sorry,
philosophically
I cut
sort
you
of
off there.
aligned. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say, I think that we've all kind of realized is that we need the market to ask for these things to have any really big momentum
That's an
and
excellent
shift
point.
in the market. And unfortunately, what we're taught is like really pretty kitchens and stuff are kind of what make our houses valuable. But what we crave and what we want is to be comfortable, dry, warm, or cool without, if you're in the Midwest or in the South, you want to be cool and dry without, having to spend so much on it. And I think in some cases, people expect that they're just already getting that, right? And which isn't always the case. So I would say that the book was geared more towards, things that our clients ask us over and over that we repeat again and again, taking all of those things from the internet world and putting them all in one place, which is some of the feedback that we've gotten that was really useful for people from the book, which is you can find all the information if you want to spend hours and days and months searching all over the internet for all the things that you should know. This is kind of a broad overview, which then you can take a deeper dive into the things that you don't know, through other resources as well. But that it's also a great place that I wish this book existed when I became a licensed architect and just got into the field, because I didn't know what I didn't know either, And so I think that this is a great starting place for builders, architects, design professionals, anyone who's young in the field and looking to move the needle because they're interested or passionate about it. It's like, okay, here's all the things you should think about. Now take a deeper dive. Here's where you learn more. And it's a great place to start building your knowledge base.
I love that. I love it. So is the building science education the biggest takeaway from the book?
It's really, it's kind of a unique book. I mean, not to, yeah, it's you can read it as a building science primer, and I think there's enough there. It's a good baseline of building science knowledge, but it's also just sort of a process book of everything you need to know, from how do you pick a contractor and what do you think about on the site, and what constitutes good design, and how do you verify things at the end. And then it's also, if you want to think of it as a coffee table book, there are 250 images in there, 12 case studies of different projects that meet pretty good house principles. So it's kind of unique in that it does a lot of different things, we think.
Yeah. And I would say that it also sort of demystifies this idea of building science. Like when we talk about building science, I think people only think performance, but there are so many things like durability. And, as the number one thing that a contractor doesn't want is a callback, right? So we should first and foremost be building durability into our building. But there are so many materials on the market now that if you switched from doing boards to plywood, years and years ago, you already built building science into your building, right? We just didn't call it that. We were
Right.
making
Right.
tighter buildings. And so I think some of what's in the book is just kind of an understanding, as I like to call it, of the sandwich of your building. What's in your sandwich and what do you expect it to do, right? And that's not even necessarily, I mean, it is building science, but it's also just good practice, right? And so thinking through how the physics of your building works too is critically important. Even if you don't think you're interested in building science, if you're using any new products that are on the market that, came out, you're changing the dynamics of your building. So it doesn't take a deep dive into that, and it is not a how-to book. I should be specific. It is a
Yeah. Okay.
why-to book.
Oh, yeah. That's a nice term. That's a why too. Um, and I
Yeah, or
guess
just, or sorry,
no. Go ahead. Go ahead, Mike.
or just along those lines. It also it is a little bit of a textbook, and that at the end of each chapter we have you considered, and so it's just along the process. It's not, are you meeting X target? It's, have you considered energy performance? Have you considered air tightness? Have you considered light and views and comfort?
And I see a lot of, again, throughout the EntreArchitect community, I've seen it on Instagram and other places, people saying, "Oh, hey, I got my, my copy finally arrived." So there are definitely architects out there that are buying this book, right? They're part of this community, and um, non-architects as well, right? Potential clients, homeowners, et cetera, out there. But as we look forward to November in Austin, Texas, where you're going to speak at the EntreArchitect Community Annual Meeting, uh, maybe in a sentence or two for all the architects out there. Maybe they're still on the fence on whether or not they're going to come to Austin. They need to come on over to this side of the fence and join us in Austin. I'm just going to throw that out there, but in a sentence or two or a few sentences, can you give us a little hint at what you're going to talk about in your presentation?
Um, well, that is a work in progress, but it will definitely
I understand. Yeah.
cover. We usually, or we have presented on it a lot, and we usually start with sort of an overview of how or the idea started, which goes towards BS and beer type local discussion groups as being important, because so much of this information is regional. Like, we don't know how to design a house in Austin, but people in
Sure.
Austin should know how to design a house in Austin. So if you have local groups, and in fact, we did just have it, our newest chapter is in Austin. Matt Reisinger is involved with it. I forget where I was, but yeah, that's that's where we start, and then just sort of go through sort of the basic tenets. It's not a hard and fast program. We're not lead. I'm not passive about saying you have to do this. It's just sort of a broad overview of the things that we think are important, or that are important to consider when designing a house in 2022.
Yeah. And I would just add to that, it's a series of guidelines, and those guidelines, it's not a program, it's not, you don't have to meet any targets, but like the guidelines sort of take you down a road, right? So we would call this, because we've been talking about Pretty Good House for 10, 12 years now, the 2.0 version, which is that we've now discovered that upfront carbon, as Lloyd Alter would put it, is a critical piece, right? So we talk a little bit about that. Like, where did your building materials come from? How were they processed? Where were they manufactured? How did it get to the site? And how much did you put into the atmosphere before you even built a building, right? So that's one of the guideline principles. But we also then, on the complete opposite end of that, talk about, well, what's in the materials that you put into the house, and what kind of toxins are we now trapping as we build tighter houses? So there's a series of points that we sort of talk about, and I think we only have a half an hour, so we're gonna introduce probably the topics that are covered in the book, and then potentially be able to have some discussion at lunchtime about it. But yeah, our presentation is more on kind of, we spent years with our local group crowdsourcing ideas, and that's how this book came about. And so
Yeah.
that's
Well, I love that, in and of itself. I mean, you're building this community, this learning community, or I'm not even sure. I'm sure somebody's got a term for it, but I think that's so incredibly powerful. And like you said, Mike, to have location specific, right? When we start building communities, what makes the most sense? Yeah. Hey, we got to have one in Austin. We got to have a different one in Maine because I have no idea. I'm not happy with the weather here in Indianapolis. I can't imagine what it is in Austin right now, which is obviously very different than Maine right now as well. So um, I'll look forward to this. Um, you have just met and heard from Emily Mottram and Mike Maines. They're the co-hosts of the BS and Beer Show and the co-authors of Pretty Good House, a guide for creating better homes. They're going to be back here with me on September 21st to give you a more of a preview of their talk. We'll talk more about the talk on September 1st. We're doing this with all of the speakers for the EntreArchitect Community Annual Meeting, just giving you a chance to meet them and then giving you another chance later on before the actual meeting to hear a little bit more about what they're going to talk about at the conference down in Austin, Texas. So Emily and Mike will be talking about how to design and build a pretty darn good house at the EntreArchitect Community Annual Meeting, which will take place in Austin, Texas, November 1st through 3rd. If you are a small firm owner or you aspire to own a small firm, or even if you just work at a small architecture firm, go over to entrearchitect.com/annual meeting. Take those two words and smash them together like they're one. entrearchitect.com/annual meeting for more information about the conference and all of the speakers, including Emily and Mike. And again, this is the first ever live conference dedicated just to small firm entrepreneur architects. So check it out. I promise you won't be disappointed. We've got an incredible lineup. This conference is modeled after some of the best conferences that we have ever attended. That we look back and go, that was a great time. That was a great conference. That's what we're trying to do here with the EntreArchitect Community Annual Meeting. And you'll get to meet Mike, you'll get to meet Emily, and a bunch of other entrepreneur architects. So join us down in Austin, Texas. I'll put the URL at the bottom left of the corner. entrearchitect.com/annual meeting is the place to find all the information and to register and figure out how to get to Austin. Until then, where can we pick up a copy, or where can we order a copy of the book?
Wherever books are sold, which is Taunton's code word for Amazon, but really Taunton Press, you can buy it directly from them. Any local bookstore can get it. Right now, I believe they're back ordered. The second printing is due late August, early September. So if you get in soon, you should be able to get one by then. But the first printing went sold out in a week, and the second printing is probably on its way. So that's
awesome. Yeah. Well, first of all, congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment, taking all of that and we were talking before we went live, taking all of these things that assembling them into a book and turning it into something tangible. So congratulations on that. That's a huge accomplishment, and thank you for that, because our community needs this. I think our community's clients need this. And I think what you've put out into the world is a really valuable thing. So thank you for that. And of course, thanks for joining me for this conversation today. Appreciate both of you for this.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff.
Absolutely. And keep up the views. They're awesome. All right. Well, everybody, thank you. Whether you're watching this live or you're watching this on the replay, thanks. Again, go to entrearchitect.com/annual meeting for more information about Mike and about Emily and about the book and everything that's going to go on in Austin, Texas, November 1st through 3rd. And I will be back next week with more introductions to more of the speakers at the EntreArchitect Community Annual Meeting. Until then, have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks.